Testing. Good evening, everyone. If I have just one quick announcement to make, and then we'll go ahead and get started. If you came in and you have your paper where you wrote down your question, if you could please give it to Laura. She'll wave at you, and then we will be able to call your name and make sure that you have an opportunity to come to the microphone. So if you could just raise your hand if you did bring your question in, that would be great. Just one final time, if you brought your paper in that has your question on it, if you could please make sure we get those so that we make sure we call your name so that you have an opportunity to share your question. Good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Fadley. I'm the superintendent of schools here in the Wilson School District. With me this evening, to my right, is Chris Trickett, assistant superintendent. To my left, Stacy Stout, assistant superintendent. And to my far left, Andrew Hoffert, who is our director of student services and supports. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out this evening to our forum. Our intent this evening is to make sure we listen to the questions from our community. I would ask for a couple of procedural rules just to make sure that when others are coming to the microphone and sharing their questions, that we allow everyone to have the opportunity to share their question in a way that the entire group can hear. Our intent this evening is to do our best to answer your questions. So whatever your opinion is on our topics this evening, there may be multiple topics. There may be just one topic. But whatever your opinion is, our goal as a district administration is to make sure that you have an opportunity to share your point of view, your questions, and like I said, we'll do our absolute best to answer your questions. Now, there are quite a few people here this evening, so in the event that our 90-minute time slot, we are unable to get to answer all of the questions. That's why we've asked you to write them down so that we can do our absolute best to go through your questions. Hopefully there will be some clarity provided, and some of the questions we can answer quickly, and others we may have to, if we don't know the answer, we may have to do the research and get the information for you at a later time. But our intent is to do our absolute best. That's why there are 4 of us here this evening, because we all share different responsibilities. Again, we're going to start the 90-minute time frame right now, and the time is 6:42. So Mrs.
Mixing up the question.
Mrs. Troutman is mixing the questions, so we make sure that we have everyone has the same opportunity to come to the microphone. So with that said, I think if there aren't any other orders of business, I would just ask that everyone is respectful. We live in a great country. We have the opportunity to share our opinions. We have the opportunity to disagree about things. We have the opportunity to do a lot of things that other countries don't. And that's, I think, what makes our country the best country in the world, because of the ability to do so. So regardless of whether or not you agree with the answer or not, we're going to do our best to give you the facts and what's happening in the Wilson School District. So Mrs. Troutman, if you could please read the first question.
Well, actually, we're going to ask individuals to come to the microphone and state your question. The reason we took your questions down is just in case we don't get to all of them. That way we have an opportunity to respond to them at a later time in an FAQ. So what I've done is I took all of your questions and I randomly put them, just kind of mixed them up, and I'm just going to pull them. So the first person is Sean Glancy.
Either microphone will work, yes.
Yeah, come to either microphone will work.
I've had the privilege of working in this district for a period of time, and my stepdaughter Caitlin is a senior, and she has special needs. My concern is that we might be going away from and correct me if I'm wrong, but we might be going away from what our true goal here is, to teach our students to be prepared for the 21st century. And my concern is that if we spend too much time dealing with CRT and all of the mess that it might create, while that may be good in the long run, I'm concerned that it will not prepare our students for the challenges that they're going to face once they leave these halls.
Chris.
So if I understand your question, Mr. Glancy, is the work that we're doing in the Wilson School District, are we going to sacrifice academic excellence? The answer to your question is no. We're still continuing to try to do our best to move each group of student, whether they're in need of extra assistance with special needs, whether they're the average student or they're the advanced students. Our goal as a school district through our curriculum is to try to meet our students at their needs, at their need level, and to have them progress as far as they can with the teachers that they have in the classroom and the curriculum that we're required to teach by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
Next is Rachel Davis.
Hi. I'm not sure on this whole equity thing and how it pertains, other than the whole racism thing and either you're racist or you're not racist, that kind of thing. But I will tell you, and I don't know if this falls under the equity or not, but mental health. I have 2 children in the school district. Both of them have issues. I've addressed it with the school several times, including an IEP. Something I brought up to the IEP staff was that my oldest had a condition. For years, I've been told he doesn't have it. At his last IEP, they talked about how socially awkward he was. And I said, well, is this something he's going to outgrow? I was told from the school psychologist that, well, we think he has a small form of autism. Now, this is what I've been pushing for years. And now to be told, oh, now we think he has it. I just felt like it's a big blow off from the school. So in the process, I am getting tested with a specialist to determine this. So again, I don't know if that's part of this whole equity thing or not, as far as every kid should be the same as far as treatment. Then I go into my youngest son, where in his kindergarten level, he had emotional issues. He was doing some really bad things in class. Instead of taking him to the office and treating it like it should be handled, they would let him sit in the hallway for an hour or more while he calmed down. All in the time where my oldest would see him in the hall as he walked to classes. I just wanted to make this aware that if we're talking equity to all students, that all students mentally get treated the same.
I thank you for that. And one of the things that I would say is, you know, our students come to us with all different needs, and we want to do our absolute best as administration to make sure that those student needs are met. And it sounds to me like you've had some frustrations with the school. I would love to have, obviously I don't want to have those private conversations in this large group, but I'd love to have my team sit down with you and to talk through some of those things so that they don't continue if they are happening, and that we can meet the needs of your children, because that's why we do what we do. I mean, as a former special educator myself, it's important to me that students that do have special needs are given the supports and the resources that they need. And if they're not getting them, I need to hear that from the parents so that we can make sure that that happens.
Okay. Okay. That's good.
Next is Henry Seidel.
Shortly after the equity policy came up, there were statements made by Dr. Kennedy, I think, or there was something on the website about the misinformation that was put out by Representative Cox. It was said that you guys would somehow meet with him or discuss that with him, and if this was already addressed and I somehow missed it at one of the board meetings, I apologize, but if somebody could explain if we worked out the details of the misinformation, or if you could explain what that misinformation was. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and yes, there has been a conversation with Mr. Cox, and I'm going to pass the microphone to Dr. Hoffert because he was directly involved with that conversation, and I'll let you share directly with you the conversation, and I think the progress that we made with Mr. Cox, Representative Cox, excuse me, on this particular issue.
Thank you, Dr. Vadley. Yeah, we had about an hour-long conversation with Representative Cox a few weeks ago now, just to kind of outline some of the concerns we had with the initial communication that went out. Mainly our concern was surrounding the timing of the communication, as well as you know, the fact that he didn't reach out to us to ask questions or to get our perspective on what we had developed at that point as far as the policy was concerned. The misinformation that we talked about was just the fact that the policy itself had been on for a first read at that time, but had already been pulled off of the agenda going into that first meeting in June because our board had additional questions about the policy as it was drafted, and we wanted to spend some more time going through it before putting it up for a second read. And so there was just you know, a complete lack of communication when it came to the timing of that communication that went out just prior to graduation, and then the subsequent board meeting when some of the communication started happening with community members. So we cleared that up, and you know, Mr. Cox agreed that he definitely could have done something differently when it came to contacting us before putting that information out in the newsletter. And then we spent a lot of time talking about different perspectives on equity and what what we kind of felt was our definition of equity and what he felt was equity. And we did find a lot of common ground during that conversation. I think he had some concerns, that we were going to be manufacturing outcomes for students, and that certainly isn't something that we're in favor of. When we talk about equity in education, our goal is to provide an equitable access and opportunity for students. And so that means tearing down any barriers that might prevent a student from accessing fully the educational opportunities here in the district. And so we had a long conversation about what some examples of what that might look like. And I feel like we made some progress. Certainly, Representative Cox and the administrative team have had a long-term, really good working relationship in the past, and we hope to continue that going forward. And we plan to continue to communicate with him as we move forward through this school year.
Thank you, Dr. Harford.
Oh, sorry. Brian Noecker? Is that right?
Hi. First, I just want to say that I moved here 5 years ago to this school district for the reason that everybody's talking about, that you could be whatever you wanted to be at this school district compared to other school districts. And I feel like if you don't apply yourself at this school, you have nobody to blame but yourself. I don't think we need anything extra for any other kid or for any kids. If you don't come here and you don't succeed at this school, it's your own fault as a kid and as a parent of those kids. The other issue I have is I just don't understand why the school feels that it needs to teach our kids to be the parents for our kids. I don't understand that. And for instance, if this is true or not, did the 6th grade middle school have to read the Ghost Boys? Is that true? Is that part of the curriculum?
The book, The Ghost Boys,
Yeah, the book.
is a book that students can choose. It's not a required reading for all 6th graders. It's a book that kids can choose to read if they choose to.
So if there was a choice, is what you're saying?
There was a choice, that is correct.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, that is correct.
No,
There was a
okay, I'm
choice.
just curious as to, even if it was a choice, why would we be talking about this in 6th grade as a 12-year-old? To me, as a law enforcement officer, and I go out and I do my job the best that I can do it every day, to read this as a 6th grader, you're not talking as like you want to have a debate as a senior class or a junior, as a 6th grader, is unreasonable by any means. I mean, I'm actually offended that this is actually a choice at this school is outrageous. Because if you want to talk about the 1% of bad police out there, every 99% of all good police will totally agree that there's 1% of bad police out there. But a 12-year-old kid to read this book, if they have questions like that, their parents should be handling those questions. On any side of the aisle, wherever you're at. That's the parent's job, not the school's job. The school's job to be the parent for our kids. You're only supposed to teach us math, science, reading, those things. That's the stuff my kid needs to learn. I'll take care of the rest. Go ahead.
Thank you for your question. So thank you for your question, sir.
Okay. You know,
Okay. So
Okay.
if I could please answer this gentleman's question. He took time out of his evening to come share something he's extremely passionate about. I want to address your question as to what happens in our school system. There are social issues that our kids deal with, multiple social issues. This particular book is an example of one of those social issues. There's a whole list of books that our students have that they can choose from. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stout, because she has the list of books that, as the assistant superintendent who works in the curricular area, she knows more about the list of books that kids can choose on these social issues. And I agree with you. There are things that parents should be responsible for. And when a student chooses to read a specific topic, I would hope that they're doing so with their parents' involvement. And their parents understand that these are the books that they can choose from. So if there is an issue, as a parent, I have 2 children in this school district as well. There's an issue that I don't want my child dealing with at school, and I think that's my family responsibility, then I should have that choice as a parent. And I believe that there are structures in place for that to occur. But let me have Dr. Stout talk about the different social issues that are available.
But that's not really my question, though. That wasn't the social issues. My point is there's a lot of diversity on the sports teams that my daughter plays on. We've never talked about race ever. My daughter still doesn't even know about race, I don't think. And she's going to be a 6th grader. My point is I realize there's social issues in America, but not at 6th grade. That was my point. If you want to talk about it as a junior or senior in high school and have these debates, I get it. You're almost an adult. You better be ready to talk about the world. But as a 6th grader, a book like this as a 6th grader is unacceptable. I'm not worried about what kind of book. I'm talking about the age of the kids that may not even know about race at this point to even get involved and go down that road.
So let me pause there. I want to get back to your question. But I do want to have Dr. Stout share the list of books that students had the opportunity to choose as 6th graders. And I want to clarify that this particular book was not read by the entire 6th grade. It was a choice, an individual student choice, which I would hope the parents would be a part of when students are selecting their topics.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Fadley. First, let me say in all transparency that I am not very involved with the 6th grade curriculum. I'm aware of the books. I've spoken to the 6th grade team about the books. My area of specialty and expertise is pre-kindergarten through 5th grade, so I know a little bit about what they're going to be offered in their book clubs in the social issues unit. So here are the titles. I would tell you that I would always encourage that, like we encourage with students, consider multiple perspectives and actually read the text, and then that would give you further information that you can speak about the text and whether or not you think it's appropriate. So there's Ghost Boys, there's a book called Harbor Me, Crenshaw, Marcus Vega Doesn't Speak Spanish, Blended, Fast Break, and Prisoner B. And some of the issues that are addressed in the social issues unit have to do really with family structures, divorce and other family structures. There is some option to take a look at homelessness. We do have homeless students in our school district. There is also incarceration as a topic. We have families that are facing that dilemma as well. There are others, including blended families, as I said before, socioeconomic status, where there are children who are poor, and they're dealing with those kinds of things. And then as well, there are ability-related issues, disabilities and inabilities, as well as language barrier types of issues. So those are things that are available for students to have conversations around in the social issues unit.
So
Okay.
there was a comment about, so what are we going to do about it? So when you have concerns brought forward, you process those concerns. So perhaps moving forward, we, the administration, can do a better job of making sure that parents are informed about what those book choices are and that they provide their permission for their particular children to read whatever book it is that their family would want, and perhaps we can send home a synopsis of here are the books, here's a summary of the books. Make sure you get your parents' permission to read this book, this topic, whatever that topic might be. Because, sir, as a parent, I do agree with your point. You should have involvement in your child's education, and you should have the ultimate authority to say what book your child reads and what book your child doesn't read. So that's one solution that we could take moving forward with our social issues topics, because the reality is, as you so eloquently said, there are social issues, and nobody knows better than a police officer that there are social issues. And how do we change those social issues? And it's my firm belief that we change that through conversation, through education, and through cooperation with our families. So if that's something that that issue coming forward can maybe develop a process where we do a better job of communicating with our parents, then I think that this meeting is very well worth it this evening, because obviously your concerns that you brought forward, you're not very happy about the fact that this book was available for your 6th grade child. And you should have that decision on whether your child reads that. I do agree with that.
Just one addition to what Dr. Fadley just mentioned. We have worked at the elementary level. I do not want to speak for the secondary level, but we have worked with families who've had concern over particular books. We had parent contact myself and Dr. Andes, who was in the curriculum supervisor position formerly, and we did work through a conversation about creating an alternative assignment or alternative option for a student that the family didn't feel comfortable with the topic, and that was a religious-based belief that they had. So we did gladly work with the family on creating alternatives for that child.
So just to close out that topic, there's there's an actionable item that we can come out of tonight with moving forward. But I do want to say one thing about our teachers. Our teachers do a phenomenal job of working with some very difficult situations in our school system. And we have all different needs, and some that you probably wouldn't believe that we have. And our teachers come to work every day, and they do their absolute best to make sure that those needs are addressed. And sometimes those needs that kids have are barriers to their ability to actually learn in school. And if you'd like to talk to me more about that, I'll be glad to schedule a meeting with you, and we can talk about that. The changing demographics of our community and the needs that we're starting to see in the Wilson School District, that we're trying to do our best with the resources that we have to address those needs. So,
okay, so we have 40 more questions. So David Weimer is next.
Good evening, and thank you for doing this. I think this is an important step in trying to get some resolution to a number of these issues. I actually have 14 questions here, and I'm only going to read one. So you can answer the rest of them at your leisure. But the one that I think is very important here is about the performance indicators. You know, you look at measures, and most organizations look at performance indicators. So if they see that performance indicators are sliding and trending down, the CEO or the managing director looks at it and says, whoa, wait a minute, we've got to do something here. So it just is confusing to me. In a school district that I've had 4 children in, and I have 6 of my 7 grandchildren in, that with the educations that they have received, that we're talking about this without an understanding of, well, what performance indicators are driving you and the board to approve a policy like an equity policy? That's my first question. The only thing that I've been able to do in research on my own is I looked at the our Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Equity and Inclusion Toolkit. Well, you might have thought that this was 2020 or 2021. It's 2017. Our governor has been approving these types of things through the Department of Education. So my question there is, what are the negative consequences for the school district and for us as a community if we just say no and do not implement an equity policy as in non-conformance to the Pennsylvania Department of Education? So those are my twofold questions.
So I'll take take the first part of your question in terms of performance indicators. So back in 2018, it became very evident when I looked with my team at the achievement profile of our student population, and it was changing. So we brought the administrative group, approximately 40 individuals together, and we had this very robust conversation about, so what is in a student achievement score? And how do kids, what impacts that student achievement score? And we started to look at data from a different lens. And I'll explain that different lens. Process-oriented data. Okay, students' ability to read proficiently by grade 3 is an indicator, a performance indicator of student success later on in their educational career. Data like student attendance. We had many students that were missing 40, 50, 60 days a school year. Well, obviously, if you're not in school to learn from these wonderful teachers that we have, that's an indicator of failure potentially. Truancy, behavioral issues, those are indicators, process-oriented indicators and data that we started to look at to assess how we could continue with the high academic excellence that your children and others in this school community were able to benefit from, and make sure we were addressing some of those issues with action-oriented steps in our school system so that we could move forward. So the answer to your question, I think ultimately is, do you need an equity policy to do the work on those types of things? The answer is no, you don't. But a policy is a guardrail. It's basically something that exists so that the individuals that are sitting here and others that are in positions of authority throughout the course of the Wilson throughout the Wilson School District, when we're no longer here someday, that those guardrails still exist so that the work can continue, so that we can do our best job with all different students who come to us every day. And I'll use this kind of descriptive picture so people can get it in their mind. A mentor of mine once told me that kids come to us in all different packages. Some of them come with pretty bows, very neatly packaged. Some of them come in brown paper bags, wrapped in a box. Some of them come with torn paper. And some of them just have a hard time coming. So in our perspective, all of those kids are important. So we should be doing everything we can to figure out how we should be doing everything we can possibly do to figure out how those kids can be successful, regardless of what environment they come from, because they all deserve the same opportunity. I'm not saying that they all should have the same outcome, but they all should have the same opportunity to be successful in that classroom.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
Well, the impact, if you don't focus on those things, is you have an organization in a school district that stops performing. Because let me finish my comment. For every quintile that you have within your school system, you have 25% of the kids that are performing at this level, 25% of the kids that are, and that's a generalization, 25 here, 25 there. The goal is to take each population and improve their success in school. So the ultimate answer is, if we don't improve everyone, we don't improve the organization. You might have great AP scores, but you're going to have students that aren't prepared for the world of work. So there are some things that we've done as an organization to work on that. We've through Dr. Trickett's work, in my direction to him on developing a profile of what a Wilson High School graduate looks like. What is the end game for a graduate? And those things are, I think, very simple, but we have to focus on them. Life ready, ready for the world of work, and college ready. Those are the things that we want to try to instill, and all of those skill sets that go with creating those graduates. They start in kindergarten and they culminate in their senior year and all the way through the continuum. So the answer to your question is, if you don't do these things well, if you don't focus on the things that are real issues in your school district, then one group's going to slide backwards.
I think we need to move on to the next question, because we got like 40 more to go that people signed up for. So Jeff Janakova.
So a couple points of clarification as of what was shared here tonight, and then I'll begin my statement with this really a series of questions focused around one theme. The meeting with Representative Cox, who was all in the room? It was a phone call with just yourself? No board member. Thank you. Mrs. Stout, I believe, right? Mrs. Stout? Dr. Stout. Sorry, my apologies. Were parents able to preview these books that you highlighted prior to the start of class? Okay, thank you. All right.
That is an answer we can get for you, though, if we don't have it.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate it. All right. So here's my statement, series of questions, again, all around one theme. As the school board has yet to put forth a proper draft of their equity guide, equity to guide curriculum, the community is left to research on their own, which I believe many here do. As such, I often read op-eds and articles, other articles online. Just today in the Reading Eagle, I read an op-ed by Leonard Pitts titled, "Let's Talk About the Things Children Won't Be Learning." Now, I've been in business settings already where proponents of equity policies and teachings state their case as Mr. Pitts' op-ed did today, and this is a summation of all things I've heard and read. If white people and children's feelings get hurt, that's okay. They should be hurt, or that's just the reality of this discussion. Is this board, administration, and Wilson School District willing to adopt curriculum and more damaging a mindset where the known byproduct is that children's feelings are hurt? and possibly all children's feelings are hurt. By the way, these are children who had no part in any of these terrible discussions that have brought us here tonight. And in fact, like my children, had great-grandparents living the ideals in the time of the civil rights movement to improve their respective corners of the world. Is there not a better way to teach the sad acts of Reconstruction period, not slavery, the Reconstruction period? I understand the damages of the Reconstruction period on people of color up through the civil rights movement. Will we remind children that today all people have full legal protections? Will the school district teach that the largest institutions of today, like banking, finance, housing, academia, are some of the biggest systemic offenders of equity? And will you admit that those institutions largely lean left politically? Can we not teach redlining, housing issues of the past, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and other past injustices without denigrating some of today's children, making them feel less as though they were there? Why is hurting children's feelings part of the equity plan mantra and thought process? And again, I bring these questions forth because there has been nothing brought forth from the board, and we are approaching the second reading. So is Wilson School District truly interested to get to the root of the problem, or would they rather rehash the past and in its wake create division and resentment where there very well may have been none before? Are you truly interested in seeing all children succeed, or is hurting 66% of your student body feelings acceptable to you?
Okay, so I'll start with this, and there were a lot of questions embedded there, so I'll do my absolute best to get to all of your points. I don't think it's appropriate to hurt any child's feelings. I don't think that is our goal as educators. Our goal is to build kids up and to make kids successful, regardless of where they come from. I think I've said that earlier, regardless of the color of their skin, their economic background, whether they're poor, rich, middle class. Our goal is to build kids up, not tear kids down. Second part of your question regarding the teachings of the state standards, our teachers are given a list of required course material that is approved by the state Department of Education, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Do I agree with 100% of the curriculum? I don't. Just like many of you might not. You know, do I think there should be different focuses in different subject areas? Certainly I do. As a former special educator and economics teacher and U.S. history teacher at the high school level, I tried to do my best to teach kids the history of our country, and I tried not to assign color to it. But there are issues that our country has gone through that I think form context and help us as a society understand how to move forward and how to progress. So to your question, I don't want to hurt kids' feelings, although that's a natural part of life. Kids get their feelings hurt, but we should not do that intentionally with our curriculum. We should do our absolute best to teach them to be independent thinkers. We should give them the opportunity to compare and contrast, and ultimately, hopefully, to work with their family to assign those values that their family brings as a group to the school. Because ultimately, as parents, and I have 7 children, as parents, isn't that our ultimate goal? To create young adults that go out into the world that can think for themselves, solve problems, and understand differences that others may bring. And not that they're wrong, but they're just differences. So that's what we're about here. And whatever literature you're reading, out where individuals may be doing things differently in different communities, I'm here to tell you that's what we stand for. And regardless of where this policy ends up with the board, whether the board says bring forward a policy on equity or not, we're going to continue to do our absolute best to make our kids that come to Wilson School District successful adults. That's why I do what I do. And when it's no longer possible, I'll go do something else, because that's the passion that we bring and the teachers that work here bring.
Robert Pugh.
Good evening. So, as all these other parents are here, I'm here because I'm concerned about my children and what they learn in this school, okay? Now, I grew up in the city of Reading. I went into the military. I don't see skin color. I just see one race, a human race. And on these walls, I see signs that say every person is the architect of their own character. Refuse to accept anything but the very best, and you will very often get it. Yet we're being told that, well, that's only true if your skin's one color. We're living in a world where we have companies like Coca-Cola saying, be less white. What message is that sending to all of our children? Both white, people of color, everything. And what is the current inequity in this school? And if there is that much inequity where an equity policy needs to be adopted, why did you fail as an administration and allow that to happen?
I'll attempt to answer your question, but I would stand here or sit here and proudly say that this administration hasn't failed at anything.
Well, then what's the need for the policy? What's the need for the policy if there's no failure? Because what you're saying is that there's current inequity in our school, that we need to adopt an equity policy. So if that's the case, you failed. Period, end of story.
Okay, so I'll finish my answer. Okay, thank you. So kids come to our schools, like I said earlier, with all different issues. We're talking about equity of opportunity. So our belief, okay, can you just let me finish? I let you ask your question and I let you take your jab at me. So I'm not going to do that in return because, well, it was. Can you let me finish? Thank you. So equity of opportunity. So what we're saying is that every student that comes to the Wilson School District should have the same opportunity to be successful. So what does that look like? So a student comes to me and has handicap or a disability that limits their ability to access this particular stage. So what is the equity of access? It's figuring out how to get that child onto, just let me finish. Let me finish. Okay. Let's go to the next question. Next question. Well, if you're not going to let me finish my answer, and you're going to keep interrupting me, then we're going to move on. Do you want to hear the answer, or do you want to continue to interrupt me?
Standing here, and the rest of the people that aren't happy with your used car salesman pitch is who are interrupting you.
Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna try to answer the question if you allow me to. Okay. So equity of opportunity. Okay. That child should have the same opportunity as any other child, correct? Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
I 100% agree. So you're telling me that's not currently the case?
That is the case, because we continue to focus on making sure that students have that opportunity. And you're asking me, why do we need a policy? I said earlier, I don't need a policy to continue to do and focus on what is best for the success of all students. Now, you have your opinion, and I respect it, okay? Because you don't agree with my answer. It's my answer, it's my opinion. You can respect it or not respect it, but that's my opinion. We're here to do a job. That job is not an easy job. We're here to try to do what's best for kids.
And I understand that, and I never said your job was easy, and I certainly wouldn't want your job, especially in today's political climate, but you're here telling us all different answers. For instance, you're going off about truancy and people with 50 and 60 days, and that's why we have truant officers, but nothing's being addressed why children in my children's third grade class are saying to them, gee, you know, us black people, we're becoming extinct because you white people are killing us. But that was never addressed. That's never addressed. But what we're here is we're talking about critical race theory where we're supposed to all be equal, but you only address it if it goes one way. That's it. I'm going to sit down now.
That's not what I'm talking about. Next question.
All right, I might not get this last name right. Jared, is it Pummer? Jared? Sorry. Did I say that right? I couldn't read it, sorry.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. I'd like to address the question, in light of the past year and a half horror show dealing with the pandemic that we have all had, why is it that I hear far more from the board talking about this equity policy than a specific, measurable, attainable, and realistic goal of how we can get our students back on track after the grievous loss of learning they've had to deal with due to the way that the end of the 2020 school year was handled, and then the utter train wreck with masks that everyone had to put up with over the last year. You know, as a parent, I want to make sure my child is getting a quality education and being caught up. I mean, I see that a lot of energy is being put forth over this equity policy, but I haven't seen a really clear enumeration of why it's needed if you say that you're just going to go try to take care of the things anyway, which, you know, if students have a need for access, it's the right thing to do to take care of them. You don't need a policy around that. I'm more concerned about making sure we get our kids back up to speed after the last year and a half. It's been a nightmare for us as parents. So where's the focus on that? Because I'm just not hearing it.
It's a great question. So let me tell you about some of the things that have already occurred. So there was a program for students in grades, the summer in the park, through fifth grade. I need to make sure I answer the grade correctly. Students it was offered free to every student who wanted to and family who wanted to participate to work on academic related goals this summer, and we had that environment in 3 of our community parks in the Wilson School District. That's one example. We also had a situation where our students who chose and families who chose to access summer programs could do so free of charge, so that no one was turned away at the secondary level. So there's 2 examples of things that have occurred so far. We've also been working throughout the course of the summer to develop and plan for ways to engage our students in an environment where they can have an opportunity to work with their teachers through some changes at the high school to get additional assistance in their coursework this coming school year. We've looked at how we do our homeroom at the middle level, and we've worked on developing some after-school programs at the elementary level to benefit kids. So there's just a few of the examples, and there are probably more that teachers are doing that I don't I don't have knowledge of, because again, our teachers come to school, they stay after school, they work with kids. If kids have needs and we're aware of them, we try to meet those needs. So if you'd like to talk more about that offline, I'd be glad to do so. Anyone on this team could share other examples, I'm sure.
Certainly. I'd like to see a lot more focus placed on that than controversial policies. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Rick Crump.
Okay, to recap, so we've established that we don't need an equity policy, and that all the inequities that you've listed have happened under your watch, and that we're looking for better management. So the question that I have left is, because I'm going to revisit a question that you tried to spin your way out of earlier, what are the financial strings, civil liabilities, or criminal consequences going to be imposed by a government entity at any level if we do not pass and implement an equity policy?
I don't believe there are any criminal
Thank you.
responsibilities.
Lisa Marie Stonaha.
So in June, I met with Dr. Hoffert, Dr. Faley, and Mrs. Troutman, and I was told the reason that we had an equity policy is because we receive funding. And if we didn't have an equity policy, we would not have funding. So my question is, what we're all talking about is not in the definition of the current equity policy and reading. And in August 2020, in the board meeting, we mentioned educational changes made to our English department based on an equity task force that was implemented. So how are we able to make equity changes if we don't have a policy to align to it? And what programs are we using to measure up to equity? Because if we just create our own version, our own definition of equity, there's no guardrails in place to protect our teachers, to protect our students, to protect the parents. And there's nothing for us to align to. And as someone who has a lot of experience in the corporate world of diversity and inclusion, I know how important it is that you have to align to a program. We also have to all agree on the definition of equity. And it was very clear in the last school board meeting that every single school board member, as well as all of you, have very different definitions of what equity is and what it is not. And if we can't agree on a definition, we don't have anything to align to, but we're making changes, we put ourselves in a very difficult situation that may cause us to be in a really, really bad situation with no protection for our students, for our teachers, our parents, or any of you. So what is the actual policy, and what are we aligning to? What's the strategy? What's the plan? And how much is this going to cost all of us, and how much more are my taxes going to go up?
So I'll take the first part of your question in reference to your meeting with Dr. Hoffert, Mrs. Troutman, and myself regarding the funding tied to the comprehensive plan. So there is something called the comprehensive plan, which is a requirement of the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And within that comprehensive plan, it is a requirement. One of the requirements is to have equity goals. So in that plan, there are equity goals. And in order to meet the requirements of the Pennsylvania Department of Education, that plan had to be submitted, has to be submitted to them by a certain date. I don't know the date off the top of my head. But those goals have been on display. The required 30 days. We talked about them in several board meetings. So what are we aligned to? if there are so many different definitions of equity, I think is your point, correct? I think our job in the development of policy is to work through the process to define that as an organization. And that's why when you go through the policy development process, there's an initial policy that is typically sent from Pennsylvania School Board Association to school districts. And that's how we know as school districts, through that funnel, what are requirements of law, which we don't have a choice of, and what policies are not a requirement of law. So that's where it starts. And then it goes to the conversation with the policy committee, of which there are board members that serve on that committee, and they decide what to move forward in terms of a first reading. And a first reading is a rough draft. And the first reading is intended to engage conversation in that particular policy. Okay, that conversation happens. And the administration works with the board members on that policy committee to make edits to that policy based on the conversation and direction of the elected officials in the school district. And then it comes back to the board for a second reading with conversation. The board gets to weigh in again on whether they like the edits or not. And then the administration goes back to work and makes the changes that the board has asked the administration to make, and then it comes back to the board for a final reading. And at that final reading is when the board approves the policy. At any time period throughout that process, the board can decide to continue the development of a policy or not to continue the development of a policy.
I was told by board members with having conversations that no work is to be done on the policy by the task force until there is an approved policy. And there are reports in the meetings that work is being done, but there's no specifics of what the actual work is or outside of talking to English teachers. So are you allowed to continue to have the task force to make changes without aligning to an equity policy? And is that in the best interest of our school?
So if I understand your question correctly, is the equity task force allowed to make changes to what happens
to curriculums without an approved equity policy? Because on the August 5th, 2020 meetings, it says that the equity committee reported out that they have enabled a task force. They thanked the administration for mobilizing and for all of their support, and that they've already met with English teachers in changing the curriculum and adding in equity. It's not defined in the notes of what has happened. I was told by board members that you cannot do that without an approved policy.
So first and foremost, any changes to curriculum would need to go through the curriculum committee. And
so did the curriculum committee approve that? Because it's in the meeting notes that the changes happened with the English teachers. It's in the August 5th, 2020 meeting notes that curriculum changes are being made by the English teachers without an equity policy. And as someone who is very versed in diversity, that is a dangerous place for our school to play in. So I'm gonna do my best to answer your question. I am not aware of that, but I'm not the administrator that sits. Let me finish, please. Dr. Trickett and Dr. Stout are directly responsible for the curriculum committee, so I'm going to let them answer the question as to what has happened in the curriculum committee. Thank you.
Thank you. To my knowledge, there was not conversation as a result of any work that was done within the Equity Task Force into recommending a change to curriculum. Based on the timeline that you just identified to me, and my remembrance of that, we would not have been able to, they would not have aligned. our curriculum proposals go before our curriculum committee typically in the winter of the preceding year, because we have to roll out and communicate with our parents, our children, and then obviously develop the curriculum and instructional resources. So I would have to go back to the notes, to the minutes that you're discussing, and then go back to our curriculum committee agenda notes to confirm or to have that conversation with you.
So then my follow-up question is, if the task force is operating outside of the policy, outside of the curriculum committee's approval, what happens then? Do we just, oh, it's okay, or is there going to be, will we be made aware, and will it go to the curriculum committee for approval? And if it's not approved, will it be taken out?
So I'm going to ask Dr. Hoffert to address that question, because he chairs the ad hoc committee that you're speaking of.
So I would have to agree with Dr. Trickett. I'm not sure that the timeline really matches up with a change to curriculum as a result of the Equity Task Force. The Equity Task Force started in July of 2020. So we maybe had two meetings that were basically small group discussions at that point about what some of our concerns were and what some of the things we might want to address would be as a small group. And at that time, the group was very small. So to say that there was a change authored by the Equity Task Force in time for August of 2020, that just did not happen. Now, if I recall from the notes of the minutes, it sounded like the board member was indicating that she talked to some teachers who had an interest in this area, but there certainly was not a change to a curriculum approved or even authored by the Equity Task Force at that point.
Okay. But in the meetings, it says that there was. And that's my concern, because we don't have an equity policy.
Right.
We have not aligned to anything that can be rolled out in a fashion where everybody's on the same page. There are protections involved for parents, teachers, students, all of you. And if we have a task force that is operating outside of the committee, that is a problem. And it's going to come back to harm the school.
So part of the work of the task force was to review the sample policy from PSBA, make some initial edits, and then pass it on to the policy committee to review. I mean, that's part of what the task force was doing. And other than that, there, again, no curriculum revisions made, no changes to operations. I mean, at this point, we were collecting information, asking questions, and honestly coming up with more questions at the time. So there, again, no curriculum was changed at that point.
So my question about the strategy and aligning to that, and how much is this going to cost us?
At the present time, I don't believe that we've set aside any budget related to the Equity Task Force, period.
Thank you.
Craig Stoneha. Craig.
Dave, I also had like 15 questions, but I think my wife just stole them all. Well, I have a couple of things. So first, thank you guys for doing this evening. I know these are fun for you. And I mean, my first one, I just want to say that we clearly, I mean, I don't know how many people are here, but it's a good amount. There's applause on both sides. This is about as divisive as an issue gets. Why are we pushing this so hard? You've already said there's not a financial motivator here, and I do believe we've had that conversation before. There's no penalties coming down from the state. There's no penalties coming down from any of the other organizations, and a significant portion, I would say, of the parent base and the community base don't want this. But we still have it on the agenda. We're still having multiple readings. We're still having discussions as if we're just going to steamroll forward. What's the motivating factor here? And you yourself just said, even if we don't pass it, we're still going to do the right things by the kids. We're still going to get these things done. I mean, I understand your point about a form of legacy to make sure this thing lasts, but I've read every version that you guys have posted so far, and this thing doesn't say anything. I mean, version 1, version 2, it doesn't matter. It really just says that we're going to give power to view everything through the lens of equity, which is about as broad-based as you can get. I mean, so this thing really doesn't have any sort of guidance right now. It doesn't have any sort of penalties for not pushing it, except to ostracize a significant portion of your electorate for the school board or whatever? I mean, what's the motivation here? What is driving this?
So like with every policy, the Pennsylvania School Board, like I've shared, sends recommendations to school districts all over the Commonwealth. There are many institutions that have, K-12 institutions that have adopted equity policies that meet the needs of their community. At the last meeting, I think I outlined 7 goals that I recommended to the board that they consider as ways to move forward. So there is no push from administration on having to have an equity policy. Part of the reason we're here this evening is to hear from the community so that we can share the perspective that we've heard regarding some of the concerns that you as parents have. Because what I heard, and I heard it from several people, and I processed it, was you come to the microphone at the board meeting, you ask your question, you give your public comment, and there is no discussion back and forth. That's why I'm here tonight, because I think there is a significant need based on the community that's come out to have this conversation. And whether or not we end up with a policy, that is something that we will go back and discuss. But again, those 7 goals that I outlined, Craig, those are important. Those are important goals for any organization to focus on in the K-12 realm. And if those are the things that we can accomplish and the community can stand behind those goals, then I think that's great. Then I think that could be the path forward. But again, policy, you ask what's the purpose of an equity policy? It's to establish guardrails. And if the language isn't what the community is supportive of, if we can come up with language that the community is supportive of, or we can come up with goals that we can have moving forward, then to me, that would be a win.
So if we can't get to that point, you guys would be fine with just scrapping it, moving on, and possibly revisiting it at some point in the future?
I would say, personally, I'm more concerned about, I'm not as concerned about having a policy as per se I am about making sure that we do the work to make sure that all of our kids are successful. That would be an accurate statement.
Well, I would say by this turnout, I don't think we have to worry. We've got plenty of engaged people. You guys are here. I mean, a policy isn't going to make us a better community. So this type of turnout, this type of activity is what does that. So, and you guys as well. Thank you. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Dwight Wegman.
Well, I had 10 questions, but I only could get a couple down. So anyway, we'll get right to it. So at last week's board meeting, Dr. Fadley stated that no CRT would be taught at Wilson. Therefore, will the administration provide instruction to teachers that CRT teachings are to be removed from the lessons? Will the curriculum committee review the no CRT platform with teachers? Will the administration review all teaching materials being used in Wilson K through 12 and remove CRT material? That is what your statement means to me. So what is this administration prepared to do to keep the promise made last Monday night? And then just furthermore, I'd say if CRT is not to be part of the Wilson curriculum, then it would appear completely reasonable for the board to pass a resolution stating this fact, similar to what Tulpehocken did in July. Even with last Monday's statement by Dr. Fadley, it's unclear to me what would prevent a teacher from introducing CRT-related material in a classroom. So when can we expect this resolution to be introduced?
Okay, I'm going to do my best. That's a fair question.
There's a lot there.
So I think we have to to understand as a board, whose definition of CRT are we talking about? Because CRT is a theory. It's a theory. If you read the literature, it's a theory that is introduced at the collegiate level. So I think the answer to your question is, I think I said it very clearly, that as superintendent, I do not endorse the teaching of critical race theory in our schools.
You did, right?
Period.
So how do we know that that becomes a reality? In light of the Ghost Boys book, just for one example. That's a racially charged book that presents a definite viewpoint.
So, sir, excuse me, hold on just one second. This gentleman has the microphone, and so again, I go back to who is going to define what materials are CRT and what materials aren't CRT. What I will tell you is, I believe it's important to teach social issues and how children deal with social issues. I think that it's up to the family unit, and I don't see there he is back there. It's up to the family unit and the parents to determine which books they want their children to read. I think that's a parent right, and I think I shared with you some processes we could have put in place to ensure that parents have that authority. So short of that, I can't guarantee you this evening that we're going to have a resolution, because that is something that the board would initiate, a board resolution.
Okay. So I think you are aware that at the end of June, the National Education Association, the largest teachers union in the country, made a resolution to promote CRT in all 50 states in all public schools. And they doubled down on that. Now, you said it's a collegiate theory, but the NEA says they want to introduce it starting at the kindergarten level. So how do we reconcile those two things?
So first and foremost, there are many different issues other than the one we're talking about tonight that I deal with on a regular basis with my team and with teachers in our school system. Because if the NEA came out with a position statement like that, doesn't mean that every school district in America supports their statement. So I just clearly communicated with you that I don't believe critical race theory, specific lessons on critical race theory, a curriculum on critical race theory should be part of a K-12 system. But I do believe that social issues must be dealt with as a community and as a family.
Okay, well, I would just say the Ghost Boys book, that was introduced to students at a 6th grade level, right?
The Ghost Boys book was a choice of a list of textbooks or of novels, or whatever you want to call it, fiction, that kids could choose from. And I outlined that perhaps we could do a better job of making sure that parents understood the social issues that their child wants to know about. Because if a student at the 6th grade level has a concern about that particular topic, that should be a conversation at the family, with the school, and we should work on that together. Now, there will be some families that don't want that topic discussed, and we should honor that.
Okay, so my follow-up question is, okay, so a 6th grade student what analytical reasoning capabilities do they have compared to the adults in the room?
Well, I'm not a psychologist, and but what I can tell you is our 6th grade students deal with social issues all the time, and they come to their teachers, because I used to be one of them, they come to their teachers wanting information, and they want to hear about these issues. And that's where the family and the school need to partner. Because if that child has an issue or concern about a social issue, we should not ignore it. We should share it with the family and say, hey, Johnny asked me this question today. Has he talked to you about that? Technology is a wonderful thing. In the old days, when I was in the classroom, we didn't have the luxury of sending an email. We stayed after school and we made phone calls. Today, it's simple. Hey, had this conversation with your child. We have all kinds of tools to do this, Class Dojo and all of these things.
Okay.
I think this is a conversation with the family.
I applaud your statement about including the parents in this discussion. So then I'd say they should be included in an equity task force because they're not represented in your proposal right now.
That's fair. That's a fair statement.
Okay, so it's 8 o'clock. We started about 10 minutes late, so we'll continue for an additional 10 minutes. We have over 25 questions to go. So that's the reality we're at. Nancy Wisman is next.
I just have a question of what the difference is between differentiation and equity. It seems to me like we've slid the term from differentiation, which means teachers and the school staff do everything they can to enable a student's success. And that's been around since 2005. Every school district in Pennsylvania has been doing this. And it sounds to me that equity sounds pretty much like the same thing, except we're calling it equity now. So what do you perceive to be the difference?
So thank you for the question. Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about differentiation, we're specifically, in most situations, looking at the classroom and looking at academics. Reading groups, reading levels, how are we accommodating for a specific student who's reading at one level versus a student in the same classroom who's reading maybe 2 levels higher. So we're differentiating within that classroom to provide the level of instruction that that child needs. When we talk about equity, we're looking kind of more broadly at the school system, at engagement, looking at how are students enrolling in higher level courses, and at what, is there a disproportionality in the students who are enrolling in a higher level class that are socioeconomically disadvantaged than students who are not. So we're looking at some of that data to determine if there are things that we can do to try and provide that equitable opportunity for students to be enrolled in those courses, or to participate in a certain activity, or to be involved in a sports team that maybe they can't afford because they can't get past the activity fee, as an example. So there are things that are in place within our district that we can do, we can take care of, to try and ensure that all of our students have that equitable opportunity.
So it's sort of an economic, it's more of it's differentiation, but with the economics behind it.
Not just economics. I mean, it crosses a lot of different areas. But yeah, it's one example.
Pretty much the economics, yeah.
One example.
Okay.
Melissa Challenger.
I feel like I'm back in school talking in front of a big classroom. So the gentleman over here that was the police officer that talked about the 6th graders and not having that discussion, consider yourself fortunate. I'm not sure where you are, sir. My 6th grader was called the N-word last week. He came home from the bus his very first day of 1st grade from Wilson, which has been phenomenal, by the way. We love our school district, and I love our educators. I just want to say that. And asked me, Mommy, what's an N-word? So my husband is a first-generation American-born Mexican, and he's very dark. And we've had to have these racial discussions with him from the time he was little because it is a fact of life. So I think that the important thing to remember here, we're getting caught up in terms and CRTs and equality, whatever you want to call it, it's semantics. We're talking about teaching history here. I think we're talking about the fact that there has been systemic racism in this country for the past how many decades. We are talking about acknowledging that. That is a fact. It's not up for debate, it's not an opinion, it's not a political party, it is a fact. And I think that's important to bring out here. And the fact that so many kids in this school district are, not so many, but many are disadvantaged, it is because of those systemic racist policies that have factually gone on. This is not up for debate. We're talking about yes and no, black and white, for lack of a better term. Okay, let's talk about, yes, I do have an example. So we'll talk about in the 1930s, when you literally had the United States.
Hold on just one second. Somebody asked her a question, and she's going to give an example.
So in the 1930s, you literally had the United States government drawing boundaries around areas that were lower financial income areas, which happened to also be predominantly minority. So those people were less able to have access to things like mortgages because they were in the wrong area. Even now, we see it systemically in our school districts. So that's something that's a generational thing that goes on and continues to this day. Poverty, illiteracy, you name it. It all comes back to the same systemic racism that exists today. I think teaching our kids about that is very important. And if you haven't had to talk to your kids about racism, call yourself lucky, because not everyone has had that ability. That wasn't a question. But again, I just want to reiterate that I am incredibly proud that my child attends Wilson School District, and I could not be more grateful for our educators, for all of you, for being here, for taking, yes, these shots. I appreciate all of you, truly, and I'm still proud to be here and be a parent in the Wilson School District.
Thank you.
Zoe Hansen.
Is this okay? Can everyone hear me? I would just like to say, I would just like to say that I actually chose to read a book that educates people about POC, and I did not find it bad at all. I was actually happy to educate myself about how to be respectful and towards POC. I would just like, I'm sorry if this sounds passive aggressive. I just want to I just have a question of if you're aware about how the refusal of equity for all damages the school in the long run.
Can you repeat your question, please?
I just wanted to make sure if you are aware about how the refusal of equity for all damages the school in the long run. Well, a school that refuses equity for all.
Yes. Well, personally, I don't think opportunity, equity, fairness is a word that is damaging or a process that would damage our community. I think it would make our community stronger. I think that there are examples throughout history where we've had meetings like this that were very difficult conversations with many different viewpoints. And people left perhaps with a piece of information they didn't have before, or they changed their mind and their opinion. We've seen that throughout the course of history in context in education, with the civil rights movement, with the work of Martin Luther King, with some of our presidents that have pushed these agendas, with some of our presidents that have had opposite viewpoints of this particular agenda. And I think I started this evening talking about what makes America great. This is one of the things that we get to do that many countries don't get to do. We get to debate, if you want to use that word, or hear different perspectives about very difficult issues. Everybody comes through it with a different understanding and a different experience. So I think I'm respectful of the experiences that have been shared for people and individuals that don't support an equity policy. But I'm equally respectful of people who do. And ultimately, some of the things that have happened in our country, I'm not going to change as one person. My job is to run a school system to try to do what I can do to make kids successful, all kids successful. I don't care where they live, you know, what their orientation is, their gender, the color of their skin, their privilege, not having privilege, but I work for all kids and all families, and I think we should all do that. That's why Wilson is the Wilson it is, in my opinion. I've been in multiple places, very difficult school systems. This is the highest performing system that I've had the privilege to work in. And it's because of our differences. We have a very diverse community in Wilson, and we do very good work in the classroom with all kids. All kids. Do we have our struggles? Absolutely. Absolutely we have our struggles. Are we perfect? I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not perfect, but I'm respectful. I listen, I process, and I try to take these concepts and put them into action that benefit kids. That's my goal. Thank you very much.
Theodore McGuire.
While he's making his way to the podium or to the microphone, I'm reminded it's a lot like the classroom where the first two rows are predominantly empty. It seems like that's the case at the classroom and in church. I don't know what the reason for that is, but if we do another one of these, somebody sit close to us in the front row. Go ahead, sir.
All right, I'd like to say thank you to everybody that's here and appreciate all the differing opinions and all the different thoughts. My biggest concern with the equality is not so much about economics, about race, about where you're from, anything else. My biggest concern is about the actual education each individual student is getting based on their needs. My son, like myself, had a learning disability. One that, when I was a child, was not taken seriously until high school when I had a teacher, not my school district, a teacher, discover that disability and help me through it. Right now, my son is struggling. Even though he's been diagnosed with this disability, he has been getting some help. But at the same time, while he's getting this help, other kids are getting much more. And I will not say anything specific about those kids other than they're in a different situation that they get more help. And that's where my problem with the equality is why are some students getting more than other students, whether they have the same problem or not? And that's one of my biggest concerns is my son is not an idiot. He's a very intelligent young man. He read that description of that book, the Ghost Boys. He understood, knew, and wanted to read it. But that's because I'm a firefighter in the third largest city in the state. I've been doing it for 22 years, and I've seen an awful lot of things that most people in this room will never experience in their lives. And he's been part of that because I tell him every day. My wife is a paramedic for 22 years. She has seen god-awful things as well. And we share those experiences and that knowledge to try to teach our children how to treat other people and that everybody is equal, everybody has opportunity. It's what they choose to do with that opportunity if they're given the tools. And my concern is in the equality of everything is some kids are given the tools and some kids aren't. And I don't think it's based on color. I don't think it's based on economics. I don't think it's based on the school you're in. I think it's just, I don't even know what it's based on. But I mean, there are some kids that get the tools and there are some kids that don't get the tools. And that's my concern on the equality is how are we going to make this equitable across the board, not based on race or economics, but based on the fact that every kid needs to get everything that they need to be successful, regardless.
So to answer your question, I think that's why having goals as an organization is extremely important. Because when you look at the data as to why certain students aren't as successful as others, you start to peel the layers back to find the root cause as to why that might be. Sometimes it's they need additional tutoring. Sometimes it's as simple as a significant teacher motivating and lighting that spark with the child. Sometimes it's working with the child to identify what their career and their goal or their pathway could be, what their interests are. So there are many different factors that come into play there, but I agree with you. We need to look at that to make sure that kids have opportunities to be as successful as they can be. Your son, I don't know what grade he's in, but I would encourage you to reach out to the building principal and have a conversation about what your frustrations are and work to put things in place so that your child can be even better than what they are.
And I appreciate that, and me and my wife plan on doing that. We have been doing it very actively for a long time, Mrs. Stout. I don't know if you remember me and my wife and our issues that we had with my son. But what I'm hearing tonight is it seems it's more important to discuss social issues in a specific way and without offending than it is to really educate. I get that social issues need to be addressed, and I don't disagree with that. I think the way they're being addressed in this country right now is atrocious. I think social media is a problem. I think the news is a problem. I think this is and no offense to anyone here, but I think this is an issue that has to be dealt with at home. It has to be dealt with within the community, not schools, but in the community. And I'll give you an example of what happened last year with my son during the whole election thing. And it doesn't matter which way you leaned, doesn't matter. All right, I mean, I went through school too, just like everyone else. My teachers, when I was in high school and elementary school and everything else, never ever once said anything to me about who I should vote for, why I should vote for them, what the problems are, what their issues or anything else. Yet my son came home from school repeatedly and was told by his teacher that the president is bad and his policies are bad and this person is better and you should vote for this person and if you don't vote for this person. And it wasn't just my son, it was my older son and my older daughter who had the same thing happen to them by the teachers. I get that teachers need to put their life experiences into the lessons and into their teaching. What I don't appreciate is them in a way forcing their opinions, their beliefs, and their ideas onto the children and making them feel that if they do not conform to those opinions, they are going to fail or they're going to be a failure. And that's exactly how my kids have felt. That's equity. I'm sorry. Just like the court of law needs to be blind to everything, teachers should be teaching facts, they should be teaching the information. They should not be teaching their opinions or the opinions of anyone else. They should be teaching what's in a book, they should be teaching what's in the literature, but not literature based on somebody's opinions or somebody's beliefs or somebody's ideas, but what's factually there.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is that teachers need to be able to distance themselves from a specific opinion or ideology and share the literature so that the kids can read about both sides of an issue.
Yes.
And I would agree with that statement.
Right.
So I agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. Politics out of school, honestly. You know, and I mean, I saw the picture of the bulletin boards and this flyer here, you know, and I'm not a person that hates anyone, despite what I've seen, despite what I've gone through, despite what's happened to me in my personal life. But honestly, a school, keep politics out of school. You shouldn't have things that say, you know, Biden or Black Lives Matter or anything else. That's something that should be done within that person's home, in the community, whatever, but in the school should be neutral. That's how I feel. The school should be neutral on all things, is how I feel.
Thank you for your perspective, and there are certain things that I agree with you on. We should be sharing the context of both sides of issues, and our educators, our administrators, should not oppose their opinions and beliefs on others. They should let the education on those issues and let people form their own opinions. That's part of becoming a productive citizen. You get to choose what your opinion is and what you support and what you don't support. And again, I'll go back to we're one of the countries that gets to have that opportunity.
Thank you.
Dr. It's 8:18 right now, so would you like to conclude tonight's evening, and we will do our best to go through these questions?
Yeah, I believe that, yes, obviously, there are some of you who didn't get your question opportunity at the microphone. We have your questions, and we will go through your questions. We have your name. We want to get back to you. I don't know how many of them there are. There are 18?
Yeah.
18. So it's going to take us, obviously don't expect me to do that by the morning, but we will get back with the 18 individuals that had specific questions that weren't addressed at this forum. I will also work to communicate with board members. I do want to make an announcement. I neglected to do this at the beginning of the meeting, but I want to do it now. Mr. Negrini, who's one of our board members, is asked me to share with you that he is out of town on a family vacation in Maine, and he had planned to be here other than the fact that he was out of town. But I will go back to the full board. We will share a summary in my weekly report with the board, and we'll do our best to move forward with the opinions and the voices that have been shared. Again, thank you for your time this evening. Thank you for your respectful interactions with us. And again, I will continue to try to do I will do my absolute best, as will my team, in trying to make sure that students are successful in the Wilson School District. So thank you very much. I'll stay here for a few minutes if you want to make any specific comments to me directly.